The night skies of Earth were never truly dark anymore. Satellites, stations, and distant colonies glowed faintly as dots of light drifting across the heavens. People had grown used to the comfort of knowing humanity was finally reaching upward, step by step. Yet one night the skies burned in a way no one could explain. It started as streaks, hundreds of them, blazing like silver comets across the atmosphere. At first, many thought it was a meteor shower, a dazzling show meant to inspire awe. But the streaks slowed, stopped, and hung above the planet in formation. They were not meteors. They were ships, thousands of them. For hours, the world watched, in silence. Broadcasts cut to emergency announcements. Cities froze in fear. Then a voice echoed across every screen, every frequency, every channel. The voice was deep, commanding, and carried the weight of someone used to obedience. People of Terra, I am Empress Xylera of the Orali Dominion. Your world stands at the edge of conquest. Submit, and your cities will remain standing. Resist, and Earth will burn. The message shook humanity to its core. The Orali Dominion was not unknown. Rumors of them had circulated for decades. Alien traders had whispered of their fleets, their relentless expansion, and the ruthless Empress who ruled them without challenge. But rumors were one thing. To see their fleet blot out the stars was another. In government chambers, panic spread. Leaders demanded strategies. Generals shouted about defenses. Scientists spoke of negotiations. But none could ignore the sheer scale of the fleet. Earth's entire defense grid looked like a child's toy compared to the steel mountains hanging above. And then came the second message. This time the Empress herself appeared. The broadcast revealed her throne room aboard the flagship. It was a hall of dark silver, lit by pulsing lines of alien energy. She sat upon a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian-like crystal. Her presence was overwhelming. Her skin shimmered faintly like polished metal under light. Her crown, of living gold, curled upward in elegant arcs, and her eyes glowed with the pale fire of stars. She was beautiful, but in a way that demanded silence and fear. I will give your species one chance, she declared. I do not waste armies on worthless conquests if they amuse me instead. Show me one of your kind who can touch me in a way that proves your race deserves survival. Fail, and your world will be ash. The transmission ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the threat itself. For the next 2 days, Earth debated endlessly. What did she mean by touch? Physical contact? A gesture? A test of courage? No one understood. The Empress's terms were deliberately vague, and that uncertainty terrified every leader. Governments scrambled to choose candidates. They sent diplomats trained in interspecies etiquette. They considered scientists who could demonstrate human intellect. Soldiers volunteered, hoping to impress her with discipline. But each request for audience was denied. The Empress wanted none of them. Instead, her fleet hung silent above Earth, a reminder of the ticking clock. Daniel Carter was not supposed to be anywhere near such matters. He was a systems engineer in Houston, working maintenance shifts on orbital elevator projects. His life was routine: fix failing circuits, argue with co-workers about coffee supplies, and return home to his small apartment. He was no soldier, no diplomat, no scientist destined to change history. But fate often chooses the unlikeliest people. It happened on the third day. A small team of engineers was called to work on emergency power fluctuations in the orbital elevator control hub. Stress was high. Everyone knew that if the Dominion decided to strike, the elevator would be one of the first targets. While fixing a broken conduit, Daniel overheard 2 government officials in the control center arguing. None of them work. She rejects every candidate, one official barked. We can't send just anyone, the other snapped back. This is the fate of Earth we're talking about. Daniel, with his usual bluntness, muttered under his breath. Maybe she just wants someone real instead of all your polished speeches. The officials froze. One turned sharply, glaring. What did you say? Daniel shrugged, suddenly regretting, opening his mouth. I mean, if she wanted speeches, she'd accept diplomats. If she wanted strength, she'd accept soldiers. Maybe she wants someone who doesn't pretend. Someone Normal. The two officials stared at him. For a moment, Daniel thought they'd laugh. Instead, one of them whispered, "Maybe that's it." Before he could argue otherwise, Daniel found himself escorted out of the hub, shoved into a shuttle, and placed under the eye of security officers. His protests, that he was just a mechanic, that he didn't even own a proper suit, were ignored. By the next morning, he was aboard a military transport headed for orbit. When he first saw the Orali flagship, his breath caught. The ship was not built like human vessels. It was vast, like a floating city, its hull layered in black steel that shimmered with strange patterns of light. It looked alive, as if the ship itself pulsed with the heartbeat of its Empress. Daniel was escorted by Dominion soldiers through towering halls. They were tall, armored in plates of silver, their movements too perfect to be natural. He felt like an ant among giants. Finally, the throne chamber doors opened. There she was, Empress Xylera. Her throne loomed at the far end of the hall. The air itself seemed heavier in her presence. Her gaze locked on him the moment he stepped inside. For the first time, Daniel understood what it meant to feel utterly insignificant. She spoke, her voice echoing as though carried on unseen winds. "You are the one your kind offers?" Daniel swallowed hard. His instinct told him to bow, but something else told him not to. Instead, he stood straight, nervous, but honest. "Not exactly. I think I was, volunteered." A faint ripple of laughter passed through her court of alien advisors. The Empress tilted her head, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You are untrained, unguarded, not a warrior, not a leader. Why would your species send you?" Daniel hesitated, then gave the only answer he could. "Maybe because I'm just human. No tricks, no power. Just me." Her eyes lingered on him. For a moment, the silence felt endless. Then she stood, descending from her throne with slow, deliberate grace. Her steps echoed like the tolling of bells. When she stopped before him, she extended her hand. "Then show me, touch me, and prove your race worthy of survival." Daniel's heart pounded. His mind raced through possibilities. Shake her hand? Bow and kiss her ring like in old movies? He hesitated, then thought of what humanity valued most. Not strength or pride, but simple kindness. Slowly, gently, he took her hand. Her skin was cool, smooth like glass, and carried a faint pulse of energy. Looking into her eyes, he leaned forward and pressed a soft, respectful kiss on the back of her hand. The hall froze. Advisors gasped, soldiers stiffened. The Empress herself blinked, her expression unreadable. For the first time in decades, she felt something unexpected, a warmth that spread from her hand to her chest, strange and disarming. She withdrew her hand slowly, staring at him. "Curious," she whispered. Turning back toward her throne, she raised her voice for all to hear. "Earth will be spared. For now." The chamber erupted in whispers. Daniel exhaled in relief, barely believing what had happened. He had expected to die. Instead, he had kissed the hand of an alien Empress and somehow saved his world. But as he was escorted out, he did not see the way the Empress lingered, staring at her hand as though it carried a memory she could not let go of. The shuttle ride back to Earth felt longer than the journey to the flagship. Daniel Carter sat strapped into his seat, staring out at the glittering blue curve of the planet below. His palms were still clammy, his heart still racing, as if the kiss he had given the Empress's hand had not ended but lingered in his very veins. He should have been relieved. Earth was safe. The Empress had spared humanity, at least for now. Yet instead of feeling like a hero, Daniel felt like a man who had accidentally pressed the wrong button on a control panel and somehow saved the station without knowing why. The other passengers in the shuttle, Dominion guards assigned to escort him back, watched him without a word. They were tall, silent figures, their silver armor polished to a mirror shine. Their eyes glowed faintly behind their helmets, as if measuring his every breath. He wanted to ask them questions, but something about their rigid posture warned him to remain silent. When the shuttle landed at the orbital station above Earth, human officials rushed aboard. They swarmed Daniel with handshakes, cameras, and hurried words of gratitude. "You saved us," one shouted. "You've made history," another said, nearly tripping over his own excitement. Daniel tried to smile, but the truth sat heavily in his chest. "I don't even know what I did," he admitted. The officials ignored his honesty. They were too busy taking photographs, too busy celebrating survival. That night, Daniel returned to his small apartment. He expected peace. Instead, he was greeted by silence and a blinking light on his old communicator. He pressed it, and the screen lit up with a single message, translated from the alien tongue. "Dream of the touch you gave. You will see me again. Xylera." His hands trembled. The Empress herself had sent it. Far above, aboard the Dominion flagship, the Empress sat alone in her chamber. The hall was silent, save for the soft hum of alien machines. She gazed down at her hand, the same one Daniel had kissed. For decades, she had known only power and conquest. Entire civilizations bowed or perished before her. She had ruled with strength, not mercy, and her people had followed without question. But now, her thoughts were not of war. They were of the human who had touched her so gently without fear, without calculation. That kiss had been simple, yet it lingered in her mind like a song she could not silence. In the stillness of her private chambers, she whispered to herself, "Why do I think of him?" Back on Earth, Daniel struggled with sudden fame. The media called him the kiss that saved humanity. Crowds followed him when he tried to buy groceries. Neighbors knocked on his door with endless questions. His workplace filled with reporters. He wanted none of it. At night, he dreamed of the throne room, of her glowing eyes watching him. Sometimes, he saw her hand reaching for his. Other times, he saw fire raining upon Earth when she grew tired of waiting. 3 weeks later, the sky lit up again. The Dominion fleet returned, their presence once again blotting out the stars. But this time, there was no ultimatum. Instead, a single envoy ship descended. It landed gently outside Geneva, where Earth's leaders had gathered. From it stepped Dominion envoys in flowing silver robes. They carried a message. The Empress summons Daniel Carter. She demands his presence aboard her flagship. She will accept no other. The leaders were torn. Many protested. "We cannot let her take him again. What if she executes him? What if it's a trap?" But others argued differently. "She spared us once. If she calls for him again, can we refuse without risking everything?" In the end, Daniel himself chose. He stood before the gathered officials, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "I'll go," he said. "If this is about me, then running won't help Earth. If she wants to see me again, I'll face her." The journey this time felt heavier, as if each passing moment carried him deeper into something he could not escape. When he stepped once more into the Empress's throne chamber, the hall fell silent. Xylera descended her throne as before, but her expression was different. Her eyes held not only command but something softer, something searching. "You returned," she said. Daniel gave a nervous half-smile. "Didn't think I had much of a choice." The advisors around her frowned at his bluntness, but the Empress did not scold him. Instead, she waved her hand, dismissing her court until only the two of them remained. "You puzzle me, human," she said, circling him slowly. "I have faced warriors who could crush cities with their strength, leaders who commanded millions with their voices, yet it was your touch that stayed my hand against your world. Why?" Daniel shifted uneasily. "Honestly, I don't know. I just did what felt right." Her eyes glowed brighter. No fear, no calculation, just instinct. "You're kind. You confuse me." For the first time in her reign, the Empress admitted her weakness, not aloud, but within her heart. She had spared Earth because of him, and yet she could not stop wondering why the moment mattered so much. In the days that followed, she summoned him again and again, not for ultimatums, but for conversations. She asked about Earth, about simple customs, about why humans smiled when they were happy or cried when they were sad. Daniel told her stories of childhood, of music played under starlit skies, of the taste of fresh bread, of friendships forged without purpose. Her questions grew stranger. What is laughter? Why do you hold hands? What does it mean to dream? Daniel answered as best as he could, often with clumsy words, but always with sincerity. And each answer seemed to settle into the Empress's heart like drops of water carving stone. But not all were pleased. Among the Dominion court, whispers spread. The Empress was distracted. Her attention lingered on a single human instead of the Empire. Generals muttered that her fascination could weaken them. Advisors whispered of plots and betrayals. One evening, while Daniel walked the observation deck, a Dominion officer approached him. The alien's voice was low, filled with warning. You do not belong here, human. Leave, before your presence destroys her. Daniel's chest tightened, but before he could reply, the officer vanished into the shadows. That night the Empress dreamed for the first time in her memory. She dreamed not of war or conquest, but of standing in a meadow, her hand clasped in Daniel's. The memory of his kiss returned, stronger than before, and she woke with her heart racing. For an Empress who had ruled through fear, it was a feeling, both terrifying and intoxicating. On Earth, meanwhile, the people watched the skies with nervous hope. Some called Daniel a hero, others a fool. But all agreed on one truth. The fate of humanity now rested in the hands of an ordinary man and the alien Empress who could not forget a human kiss. The nights aboard the Dominion flagship were quiet, but Empress Xylera could not rest. She sat on her throne, her gaze lost in the endless sea of stars beyond the viewing glass. The galaxy stretched wide, yet her mind was trapped on one single moment, the human kiss. She touched her hand again, the one Daniel Carter had kissed weeks ago. No battle, no victory, no conquest had ever lingered in her thoughts like this. Entire planets had fallen before her, yet she could not recall their names. But one human, ordinary, untrained, fragile, had left an impression that refused to fade. Her empire expected her to lead, to continue the relentless march of expansion. Generals demanded orders, advisors delivered reports, yet when she tried to listen, her mind wandered. She saw his eyes, his awkward smile, his sincerity. It was not power, not cunning, not fear, things she had known all her life. It was something else. For the first time in her reign, Empress Xylera dreamed. Daniel Carter did not sleep much either. Back on Earth, he was restless. Crowds still followed him. Media still called him a hero. But the noise of Earth felt hollow compared to the silence of the throne room. At night, he dreamed too. He dreamed of her, the Empress, her glowing eyes, the way she had looked at him, as if he had revealed something she had never seen before. He told himself it was only nerves, only fear. But deep down, he knew it was more. One evening, while he tried to ignore reporters outside his apartment, his communicator lit again. The same simple message in translated Dominion script, "You will come to me." Xylera Daniel sighed. Of course, he muttered to himself. When an alien Empress asks, you don't exactly say no. The next day, Dominion envoys arrived. Once more. Earth's leaders protested again, but their protests were weak. They knew that Earth's survival depended on this strange connection. "Carter, you must be careful," one official warned. "She is not your friend. She is a conqueror. Don't forget that." Daniel nodded. "I know. But maybe she can be more than that." The words slipped out before he realized how they sounded. The official stared at him as if he had gone mad. When Daniel stepped again into the throne room, the Empress dismissed her court with a flick of her hand. Alone, she walked toward him, her long cloak trailing behind her like a river of silver. "You came," she said softly. Daniel gave a lopsided smile. "Didn't feel like I had a choice." But the truth was, he had wanted to. The Empress studied him closely. Since our first meeting, I have dreamed. Do you understand what that means? Daniel shook his head. Not really. Humans dream all the time. She tilted her head, her golden crown glinting in the light. Dominion rulers do not. My mind has always been clear, sharp, free of such distractions. Yet since you touched me, I dream of things I cannot explain. Daniel's curiosity overcame his nerves. What do you dream about? The Empress's voice softened, almost hesitant. I see myself standing in a place I do not know. It is quiet, peaceful. You are there. You hold my hand. Daniel's chest tightened. For a woman who ruled through fear, her words carried a strange vulnerability. He searched for an answer but found none. So he said the only thing that felt right. Maybe it's not a bad thing to dream. In the days that followed, their meetings grew more frequent. Sometimes they spoke for hours. Sometimes they simply stood together in silence watching the stars. Daniel taught her about human things, why people laughed, why children played, why music mattered. He told her about sunsets on Earth, about running barefoot on grass, about the warmth of campfires. The Empress listened as if each word were a treasure. She had conquered hundreds of worlds, yet none had taught her about the smallest joys Daniel described. In return, she told him of her empire. She spoke of battles fought among burning nebulae, of cities built on the backs of giant creatures that swam through space, of the endless burden of command. You think me powerful, she told him one evening, but I am a prisoner of my throne. Every decision I make decides who lives and who dies. My people see me as flawless, unshaken. But when you touched me, I remembered I was alive. Daniel's heart ached at her words. He had never thought of her as lonely before, but now he saw it clearly. She was the most powerful being in the galaxy, yet she lived surrounded by silence. But outside their private moments, danger grew. Dominion generals whispered of weakness. They saw the Empress's distraction, her softened tone, her hesitation to order new conquests. To them, she was losing her edge, and the reason was clear. The human plots began to form. Rival warlords in distant sectors spoke of rebellion. Advisors drafted secret plans. One night, while Daniel walked the corridors of the flagship alone, a Dominion officer approached him from the shadows. You should not be here, the officer hissed. You weaken her. You poison her mind. Daniel frowned. I'm not trying to, I'm just me. Then you will destroy her. And if she falls, Earth will fall with her. The officer disappeared into the darkness, leaving Daniel shaken. That same night, the Empress dreamed again. This time, the dream was sharper. She stood not in peace, but in a battlefield of silence. Daniel reached for her, but when she tried to grasp his hand, he faded into mist. She woke with a cry, her chest heavy. For the first time in years, fear, not of enemies but of loss, gnawed at her. Daniel noticed the change in her the next day. She was distant, her gaze clouded. What's wrong? He asked. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. They plot against me, against us, you are the reason. Daniel felt the weight of her words. If I'm the problem, maybe I should leave. Her eyes snapped to his, glowing fiercely. No, do not say that. Since your touch, I cannot return to what I was. You awakened something I cannot silence. To lose it now would be... She stopped, unable to finish. Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle. Then don't lose it. Hold on to it. Hold on to what you feel. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his hand. Not as a ruler, not as an empress, but as someone seeking comfort. The galaxy outside still trembled under her rule. Fleets waited for orders. Warlords sharpened their blades. Advisors whispered of rebellion. But inside that chamber, the most feared woman in the stars sat quietly with a human, her hand resting in his. And though she was an empress, she was beginning to realize she was also something else. Someone who could dream, someone who could feel. For the first time in her life, she was afraid not of enemies, but of her own heart. On Earth, people still debated. Some said Daniel was Earth's savior. Others called him a hostage. But none knew the truth, that the fate of the Dominion, the fate of Earth, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself now depended on the fragile bond between one human and one Empress who could not stop dreaming of a kiss. The Dominion fleet stretched across the stars like a wall of steel, a show of strength unmatched in the galaxy. Yet inside the throne room, Empress Xylera sat in silence, her gaze fixed not on her empire, but on the human who stood quietly beside. Her Daniel Carter had grown more used to the towering halls of alien metal, but the weight of his presence never left him. He still felt out of place, a man of Earth surrounded by beings who could crush him without effort. But what unsettled him most was the way they looked at him now. Some glared with open dislike. Others whispered when he passed. And more than once he had felt the edge of danger in their eyes. The Empress had warned him. "They see you as weakness," she had said, her voice firm but soft. "They believe you distract me from conquest. And in truth, perhaps I do not deny it." Daniel had shaken his head. If caring about something other than war is weakness, maybe it's the kind of weakness you need. Her eyes had glowed at his words, but behind them, he saw the storm gathering. It began quietly. Reports reached the throne of border fleets refusing orders. Warlords who had once bowed with trembling voices now hesitated. Some whispered that the Empress had grown soft. Others spread rumors that she had been bewitched by a human. In the Dominion Council chamber, generals gathered. Tall figures in silver. Armor bowed before their ruler, but their words carried sharp edges. "Empress," one said, "the human is a danger. He clouds your judgment. Our fleets grow restless. If you do not command, they will." Another added, "Already Warlord Trask rallies forces in the Outer Rim. He says the throne has lost its fire. If we do not act, he will." The chamber buzzed, with agreement. The Empress listened, her face unreadable. But when she finally spoke, her voice cut through the air like a blade. "Are you so weak that a single human frightens you? If my empire trembles because I choose to see beyond war, then perhaps it deserves to tremble." The generals fell silent, but resentment lingered in their eyes. Later, when the chamber emptied, Daniel approached her cautiously. "They blame me," he said. Her gaze softened, rare and dangerous for a woman like her. "Let them. Their fear is not of you. It is of what you represent, change." Daniel frowned. "And Trask? If he rallies fleets against you, then I will crush him," she said simply. But even as she spoke, her hand brushed the throne, her fingers curling as though steadying herself. For the first time, Daniel realized that even Empress Xylera could feel the weight of what was coming. Days passed, and the tension grew sharper. Dominion ships patrolled in restless formation. Advisors whispered behind sealed doors, and Daniel felt eyes watching him wherever he went. One night, he awoke in his guest chamber aboard the flagship to the faint hiss of a door sliding open. He sat up quickly. A shadow moved in the room. Before he could speak, a blade of silver light flashed toward him. Daniel stumbled back, fear rushing through him. But before the weapon struck, another figure burst into the room. The attacker fell with a thud, disarmed, in a single strike. Standing in the doorway was the Empress herself, her cloak trailing like wings of fire. Her voice thundered. "You dare!" The would-be assassin groaned, captured by her guards. She turned to Daniel, her glowing eyes fierce. "Are you harmed?" Daniel shook his head, breathless. "No. But why would they try to kill me?" She looked at him, her jaw tight. "Because they fear what you mean to me." The assassination attempt only deepened the unrest. Warlord Trask's rebellion grew bolder. Reports came of fleets massing on the edge of Dominion space, and whispers within the flagship itself carried doubt. Advisors begged her to send Daniel away. "Remove him, Empress," they urged. "Show the Empire your strength again. Show them you are still the fire that burns worlds." But she refused. Her voice rang across the chamber. "My fire does not fade because I choose to spare. My throne does not weaken because I choose to feel. Let them come. They will learn what true strength is." Daniel, however, felt the pressure building. He had never asked to be part of an empire's struggles. He had never wanted to be the center of attention, let alone the reason for whispers of war. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck overlooking the stars, he finally spoke what weighed on him. "Maybe I should go back to Earth," he said quietly. "If I leave, maybe the generals will calm down. Maybe the rebellion will stop." The Empress turned sharply, her cloak swirling. "No, do not say that." "Why not?" Daniel asked. "If I'm the reason all this is happening." Her hand gripped his shoulder, firm but trembling. "Because I cannot lose what you gave me. You think yourself ordinary, but you showed me something greater than conquest. Do you not see? They fear you because you awakened me. And I—" She paused, her voice almost breaking. "I do not wish to be unawakened." Daniel met her gaze. Her eyes glowed fiercely, yet behind the light was a vulnerability he had never seen before. He placed his hand gently over hers. "Then I'm not leaving," he said softly. For a moment, silence filled the deck. Then she whispered words she had never spoken to anyone. "Stay by me, not as a subject, not as a hostage, but as my chosen." Daniel's chest tightened, his heart pounding. He had no title, no power, no crown. But in that moment, he understood the depth of what she was offering. The galaxy did not wait for tender moments. Soon, news arrived. Warlord Trask's fleet had crossed into Dominion space. Hundreds of ships rallied under his banner. He declared himself the rightful ruler of the Dominion, accusing the Empress of betrayal, weakness, and corruption by a human. The throne room filled with fury. Generals demanded immediate war. Advisors urged her to abandon Daniel. The court buzzed like a nest of hornets. The Empress stood tall, her cloak blazing behind her. "Let Trask come. He believes I have grown soft. He will learn that my strength is greater than ever." She turned to Daniel. "And you will stand with me." Daniel's breath caught. "Me on the battlefield?" Her eyes softened. "Not to fight, to remind me of what I fight for." The war came quickly. Stars lit with the fire of engines as the Dominion fleet moved to meet Trask's armada. Battle lines stretched across entire systems. The flagship itself, with Daniel aboard, became the heart of the storm. Daniel stood beside the Empress on the command bridge, surrounded by alien officers at their glowing consoles. The sight before him stole his breath. Thousands of ships, weapons charged, ready to unleash destruction. The Empress raised her hand, her voice steady. "Advance." The Dominion fleet surged forward, colliding with Trask's rebels in a storm of fire. Explosions painted the void with light. Daniel gripped the railing, his heart pounding as the bridge shook from distant impacts. Through it all, the Empress stood unshaken, her voice ringing with commands. Her eyes glowed like stars, fierce and unyielding. Yet Daniel saw something no one else did. The way her hand, hidden behind her cloak, brushed lightly against the place where he stood, as if anchoring herself to his presence. The battle raged for hours. Trask's fleet was vast, his ambition ruthless. But the Empress was more than a ruler, she was a force of will. Her strategies cut through the rebellion like blades of fire. And when her flagship faced Trask's command ship directly, her voice thundered across the void. "You call me weak, you call me broken, yet I stand, and you will fall." The final strike shattered Trask's ship, his rebellion crumbling in a wave of fire. The battlefield went silent, save for the echoes of victory. Back on the flagship, the court erupted in cheers. The Empress had crushed her rival. The throne was secure. But as she stood on the bridge, her gaze turned not to her generals or advisors, but to the human who stood quietly beside her. She had defended her empire, but she knew the truth. She had also defended him, and when the galaxy whispered of this battle, they would not speak only of fire and steel. They would speak of the Empress who fought with a human at her side, and the kiss that had begun it all. The battle against Warlord Trask was over. The Dominion fleet had returned to its patrol routes, systems once threatened were secured, and the rival warlord's name became a warning whispered across the stars. Yet aboard the flagship, Empress, Xylera sat quietly in her private chambers, far from the cheers of her court. Her hand rested on the railing and her gaze fell upon Daniel Carter. He stood across from her, looking out at the galaxy beyond the observation window. Though he was human and far from any ruler's stature, he carried himself with a calm that unsettled her more than any army ever had. "You did not flinch," she said softly, almost to herself. Daniel turned, smiling faintly. "I had to trust you, and I trusted you to know what to do." Her eyes glowed, not with the fire of command, but with something softer, something unfamiliar. "It is rare," she whispered, "to find a creature who can remind an Empress what it is to feel alive." He stepped closer, tilting his head. "Then maybe you need reminders more often." The days following the battle were filled with work for the Empress. Systems had to be repaired, fleets had to be reassigned, and sectors needed messages of loyalty. Yet she found herself seeking Daniel more than any report or briefing. She asked him about Earth, about the lives he had left behind, about the simple things she could not understand, laughter, music, and friendship. And Daniel, though still uncertain of his own role, explained as best as he could. He spoke of sunlight on grass, the smell of rain, and the feeling of home. Xylera listened, enraptured. For centuries, she had known only power, strategy, and obedience. But Daniel spoke of emotions she had never considered important. And with each story, each laugh shared, she felt her empire and herself change in ways no conquest ever could. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the Dominion's leaders. Some continued to doubt the Empress, fearful that her fascination with a human might destabilize her rule. Others, however, grew curious. If one human could earn the favor of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, what could such trust inspire? Across the Empire, Xylera had not announced Daniel to the court as her consort or companion. She wanted no ceremonies, no titles, no fanfare. But his presence alone shifted the court's perception. He was not a ruler, yet his humanity influenced decisions, softened judgments, and reminded the Empress of her responsibilities, not just to dominate, but to protect. One morning, as the flagship drifted near the outer rim, a council of Dominion advisors approached her. Their voices were cautious, hesitant. "Empress," one said, "we have observed your interactions with the human. Your judgment seems influenced. Some fleets wait without orders. Some sectors wonder at your intent." Xylera's eyes glowing like twin stars held them in place. "Is it a crime?" she asked softly. "To see beyond war? To learn what my people may truly need rather than only what they fear?" Another advisor, braver or perhaps more foolish, spoke. "But the human is weak. How can one fragile being influence an empire?" She stepped forward, her voice rising, firm and unyielding. "Weak? No. He reminds me of strength I have never known. A strength of heart, of compassion, of choice. If that is weakness, then let all the stars call me weak. But know this. The empire stands because I choose to value life, and one human taught me to do so." The council fell silent. None dared argue further. That evening, the Empress called Daniel to the observation deck. The galaxy stretched before them, infinite and quiet. "I have decided," she said, "to change the way I rule. Not by fear alone, not by conquest alone, but with guidance, and perhaps with you by my side." Daniel blinked, unsure what to say. "By my side?" "Yes," she said, her hand brushing against his, the same gentle touch that had sparked so much. "Not as a ruler, not as a soldier, but as someone who reminds me of what we fight for. Someone whose humanity, your humanity, shows me the value of life beyond war." He felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had come to this alien world, reluctantly, uncertain and afraid. Yet here he was, standing with an empress who had never known tenderness, learning from him how to see the universe differently. I'll stay, he said, if it matters that much to you, and to the Empire. Weeks passed, and the Dominion began to change. Governors and commanders learned to trust dialogue over fear, to value life over obedience alone. Reports from Concord sectors spoke of improved living conditions, of fairer laws, and of kindness replacing terror. The galaxy began to whisper a new legend, that one human, with nothing but honesty and courage, had changed an empire ruled for centuries by fear. Even Empress Xylera herself noticed the shift. She no longer viewed the stars only as territories to conquer, but as worlds to protect. The kiss, a simple gesture, had awakened her in ways she could never have imagined. One evening, after a long day of planning and inspection, Xylera took Daniel to her private gardens aboard the flagship. They were strange gardens for alien soil, with glowing plants and delicate vines that shimmered under artificial light. Yet to Daniel, they felt familiar, a reminder of the simplicity of life on Earth. He walked beside her quietly, admiring the alien flowers. "They're beautiful," he said softly. She looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "Yes, and like life, they thrive because they are cared for, not controlled. I understand that now, thanks to you." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do much. I just showed you a little kindness." The Empress stopped walking and faced him. Her glowing eyes were filled with something human in its intensity, gratitude, awe, and something deeper still. "You showed me more than kindness," she said. "You showed me what it means to live, to hope, to feel beyond duty, and for that I am indebted to you." Daniel's heart pounded. He had never imagined an ordinary human could change an empire, let alone touch the heart of the galaxy's most feared ruler. Time passed, and the bond between them grew. The Empress began to openly value his opinions, to consult him on decisions, not just of strategy but of life, ethics, and fairness. Daniel learned the workings of a galaxy he had never imagined, and in turn taught Xylera about a humanity she had once underestimated. Their friendship, rooted in a single brave gesture, a kiss on her hand, became a symbol of hope. Across the Dominion, people began to speak of the human who changed the Empress. On Earth, Daniel's fame continued, but he no longer feared it. He had found purpose, not as a ruler, not as a hero, but as someone who reminded a great Empress of the power of compassion. Finally, one quiet night, Xylera summoned him to the observation deck one last time. The stars shimmered, reflecting in their eyes. "I have ruled for decades," she said, believing that fear was the only way to hold an empire together. "I was wrong. You reminded me that strength lies not in fear, but in care. Not in destruction, but in protection. You have changed me, Daniel Carter, and through me the Dominion itself." Daniel smiled, humbled. "I'm just a human," he said softly. "I didn't do anything special." She took his hand, holding it firmly, and for the first time, she did not hide her emotions behind her crown or her title. "You are special," she said. "To me, to the Empire, to the galaxy. Never doubt that, and never forget. One simple act, one honest gesture, can change the fate of worlds." Daniel looked out at the galaxy, the vast expanse of stars, planets, and possibilities. He realized that his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. From a simple engineer on Earth to a human who had touched the heart of an empress, he had learned the most powerful lesson of all. Courage, kindness, and sincerity could alter the course of history. The galaxy whispered their story for generations, how an ordinary human had stood before the most powerful ruler, had shown her what it meant to be alive, and had changed the fate of countless worlds. And in the quiet chambers of her throne room, the Empress often smiled, remembering the human kiss that had awakened her heart, and the humanity that had forever altered the Empire. And Daniel Carter? He no longer saw himself as ordinary. He saw himself as a reminder that even in the vastness of space, one person, one act of courage and kindness, could truly change the universe.